Yes, I'm Shadan Larki from Awards Daily. Thank you all so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Our
Thank you.
pleasure.
So first of all, congratulations. I have to be really honest, and this is gonna sound so dorky, but when I was watching the movie, the thing that kept popping up into my head was like, how? Like I just didn't understand how I was seeing what I was seeing, and I couldn't wrap my mind around how you guys put this together. So I kind of want to start there. I mean, there's no book, there's no comic book, there's just a script and Gareth's sort of idea. How did you take that and translate it into what we saw?
Jay?
With difficulty by assembling an amazing team and chewing through it. John Knoll, I once asked him if what was one of the grand wizards of visual effects. I once asked him how we surmount some of these huge problems. And he goes, well, you take a big problem and you take it and turn it into some 3 different smaller problems. And you take those 3 smaller problems and turn it into even smaller problems. And usually when you're down a couple of levels, there are people that can sort of answer how to fix any specific thing. And that was true of this movie right out of the gate. So we took this amazing, huge world and we had to figure out how do we build it? And so we said, all right, well, for robots and simulants, we came up with an approach where Andrew we would do small little markers on set and we would build a digital version of Alfie or other simulants, and we would, using a combination of what we call match moving and tracking, we could create a CG version of our characters and commingle that with the performance of the great Madeline Boyles. And that was sort of the approach for our simulants, same sort of thing. And then when it came to environments, we started down this great adventure of design with James Klein, our production designer. And we'd start as he would pull frames from the movie and describing an illustration what that looked like. And then we worked with our modeling team and with our different visual effects supervisors around the world to how to build those things. And you do the same thing for uh, vehicles and for set pieces and explosions. You take big problems and turn them into small problems, and usually we have someone that can sort of figure it out. And then it takes a village. This one was a tough one, and by the way that we decided to make the movie, it was incredibly rewarding visually, but very difficult to achieve as a visual effects.
I think half the battle with world building is to actually go to the world to start building it. And typically on these movies, you have this great, amazing concept art, and it becomes, everyone looks at it and goes, this is impossible to do. We're gonna have to build a set in the foreground, and then the background would all be green screen in a studio. And we felt like, look, that never gives the best result. What we want to do is not be held ransom to these concept art images or these storyboards, but let's go to real world locations. Like if we get the crew small enough, we can go anywhere in the world, go to the best place we can find, on Google Earth or wherever, and then shoot and be organic and find the beauty and the happy accidents that we could never have predicted because we're in a real village in the Himalayas or wherever. And then when we finished in the edit and we've got those frames, that's when the design begins. Like, so not 6 months earlier when we sat in an office, but when we're like finished the movie, like we filmed the film and we're now in the edit, that's when we started grabbing frames and painting over them and doing all the design work, which meant we could basically roll with the punches and embrace all the happy accidents. And what it really takes is a company doing the visual effects, like a real leap of faith, because it's really, really, really hard to get a VFX company to agree to do a movie where they don't know what any of the shots will be, any of the ambition of the film, until it's way too late in post-production. And so these guys were kind of insane enough to do it. But I think having done a few films the other way, there was this feeling of like, we see the sense in this. I think this could work out. This does feel like the correct approach, but it could completely backfire. Which, maybe it did. Maybe they would never do it ever again. I'm not sure.
No, we'll do it again.
100%.
But we knew, I mean, Gareth was a willing participant, and he knew, I think, had the difficulty of the ask. And so that helped us in other ways, that we could sometimes say, well, this is really, really hard. Is there a version that's not as hard that gets you sort of the same level of, or close to the same aesthetic goal? So it was a much more of a conversation, and that's very rare in filmmaking, to approach a project where the director is pulling in the same direction as visual effects.
And I mean, it was stunning photography. You know, we had such rich plates to work with that it was kind of there. You know, I think between us, we know that so much was in Gareth's head while he was shooting the movie. And as long as we could kind of extract that, we could do what we needed to get the shot done. But the artists who came onto the show was so enthusiastic, because this was beautiful, rich plate. If we were adding robots there, or a vehicle on this side, or a set extension, there was so much to riff off. And through Gareth's, direction and camera work as well, there were elements and pieces of the puzzle that kind of were actually embedded into what was shot already. It just took a conversation or two to untangle it. So sort of framing up for a descending jet copter, or seeking out a moment where, oh, there's a robot over there. It was unpicking that, but I mean, it made it a challenging but a joyous process after the fact to navigate that ourselves and our crews with Gareth directly.
Gareth, you mentioned some happy accidents. Are there some that you can tell me about?
Yeah, there was loads. The whole film's full of it, I guess. I really liked. So basically, we did this. Wasn't quite a normal process, in that at the end of shooting in Thailand, it was during the pandemic, so it was a big ask. But we basically went to once the crew kind of finished, the main crew, we went with a very small guerrilla group of like 5 people, basically, to like the Himalayas, Indonesia, Cambodia, Japan, Tokyo, and we basically had a month to just do anything we wanted that we thought would look cool and could be incorporated into the film. And so all sorts of things happened. Like, for instance, like one of them, we were in Cambodia, and we're in there's this village that looks very similar to the big set piece we'd already done with the tank battle. And it was just an opportunistic moment, but we were like, oh my God, we could get this great shot of like a house being crushed. And we quickly just knocked on the doors of the people who lived in the huts. And we were like, excuse me, and we had a translator. We're like, this is a very strange request. Would you possibly consider being in a movie? We would love to film your house. And they looked confused for a second. And within 20 minutes, they're all wearing the costumes, and they're running and screaming and like really enjoying it. And so there's like a whole little section of the movie in that part of the film where those people were like doing their laundry 10 minutes earlier, and now they're like in this Hollywood film and playing along. And then ILM, they didn't have any data because it was so guerrilla. They managed to recreate those huts and all on the bamboo sticks and everything, and do all the simulation of it getting destroyed by these giant tanks. But I think the result is something that feels really a really lived-in world that's very naturalistic, and not like a studio set or anything. And like all the films we grew up loving that made us want to make movies before digital came along and took away like practical models and all that stuff.
That's amazing. My favorite shot in the film is the shot when Alfie and Joshua are being separated, and she's sort of watching him through the window, and you see all the emotions on her face, but also the scope of the world beyond. And I was wondering if each of you could tell me maybe your favorite shots, or the shots that were the most difficult to crack, where afterwards you sort of gave yourself a pat on the back and got super excited that you got it right.
My favorite shot, I would say, is when the farmer encounters Joshua and Alfie in his hut. Farmer Gan, and he's holding her face in wonderment, and he's saying they made a child. So that's sort of like a beautiful moment of connection. But it's also the way Gareth shot it, where it was very, very close to Alfie. He wasn't worrying about the visual effects. He wasn't thinking about, should I, sort of feature the technology sort of more in a more hero fashion. He was really just trying to capture that emotion and connection between them, and then ILM doing the work on top to really sell it. I think it's a really beautiful moment.
And actually, there's a shot prior where Jan pops up in a cornfield to begin with and sort of turns away from us, and we get the negative space of the hole through the head, which happened to be sort of riffing on a shot that was part of the original test that got the movie green lit. That's a lovely moment. In terms of things that were tricky, rewarding but tricky. I think trying to realize the nomad in Act 3. I mean, the nomad is just this menacing presence throughout. It's a striking silhouette. We're seeing it down from the ground. We're seeing it up above the clouds. But by the time we get to Act 3, the majority of the exterior shots are fully CG. And we wanted to make sure that, we'd built this very, very detailed asset, sort of 1.3 terabyte asset, which is big by any standards. We knew we could get close from any angle and do all the staging of the shots we needed. But how could we put it in this world that had been shot so beautifully, gritty and naturalistically early on in the movie, and make it sit, not just be sort of other. So that was a concern, but we were able to test, riff off the grain structures, vignettes, astigmatisms, all the flaring, anamorphic qualities of that early footage, and try and bring that across so it wasn't a pristine CG act. It felt of the same world. It had the same richness.
I don't know if I have a favorite specifically. I have a few favorites. I like the robots in the crusher. I think I've mentioned that one. That one's pretty cool. So it's hard to do. Takes a lot of time. Very expensive computationally. I like the robot with the child making its way up the path. A number of people actually have told me about that one, Gareth. That feels like that was a stolen performance that you got.
Yeah, there was that was the Himalayas, and we got there via helicopter. It takes 4 days to walk there. And that's the only way you can get there. And there was an old lady and a little kid, and we were filming, like it was just two of us, I think, and we were just filming, and you could see they were self-conscious, like they were waiting for us to get out of the way, like, we don't want to ruin your shot. I don't know what you're doing here, because we couldn't speak their language. And so we sort of stood to the side so they could walk past us. And the second they walked past us, it was like, this is too good. Like not to film. And I quickly got behind them, and I was trying not to be too intrusive, but I was just following them up the hill, trying to get something, because in my mind I'm like, if I can make her a robot, this is gonna be so cool. Like just a real, like, beautiful naturalistic thing that you just never normally see in a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, I think those sort of moments are one of the things that makes this movie special. And then of course, I love I like some element of spectacle. So there's a few shots of the Nomad coming down and impacting the ground. And I know how much work goes into those shots. They're phenomenally difficult, and they add an enormous spectacle. So I'm impressed. And I know maybe it's just I recognize the level of difficulty that goes into that stuff. So that's just a few of them.
Should I do one? It's yeah. I mean, it's a similar thing, really. Anything that was like had that kind of Terrence Malick-y vibe to it. Like, probably my favorite shot, because it's the one you would never ever get to do in a normal blockbuster. Is this? It was a woman just playing with some seeds in a bowl in a hut in the Himalayas, and she's just flicking some seeds and letting them fall through her fingers. I think she's sifting through them. And we turned that woman into a robot, and it just felt very like if you tried to do that on a normal blockbuster, like the price tag of that shot gets to the point where the producers tap you on the shoulder and say, why are you doing this? What is this? You know what I mean? And it's a waste of money. And that was kind of the whole point of the movie, was it should be full of these things that you never normally see. and you can't justify. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't work on a spreadsheet, but you just feel, it just feels right. And we were allowed to do them. And the studio were really supportive. They never ever stopped us from going in these crazy tangents.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you about, or just in this long day of interviews that you guys want to highlight, or just something that you feel particularly passionate about?
I mean, I always get whenever I have an opportunity to answer that question, I feel like it's a great time to mention the hundreds of people that work on these productions, and the contributions of our production designer, James Klein, our DPs, Oren and Greg, and the just hundreds of companies, or not hundreds of companies, hundreds of people across multiple companies that work on this. It's important to recognize that visual effects is really an amazingly collaborative team sport, and that the only reason it's successful is we're all pulling in one direction and we're all giving of ourselves and contributing. And so even though we're speaking in front of you, there's lots of people that contributed ideas along the way and they do it in really unsurprising ways, like the shape of models or the texturing of buildings, or just lots of little things, and they all add up to something that's much bigger than themselves with their individual contribution. So there you go.
And I do want to ask the question of the rest of you, but real quick, I just want to say that after I watched The Creator, I, watched another big sci-fi whatever where things were blowing up and everything was really loud, and I went, oh, can I go back to sort of this stripped back, gorgeous, lived in thing that I saw? And so I do want to ask you if you have anything you want to mention, but also, how does working on something like this then take you to your next project, and how do you sort of apply these principles maybe?
Oh, I like that one a lot. That's a good one. I want to hear Garrett's version of the answer.
Well, I thought it was more your question, but I think we did. I feel like every time we did something different on this film, we got a win.
Yeah.
I think all the things that have made the elements of this film that maybe stood out to the odd person were the things that we did differently. And so I just feel really empowered that on the next film, just take it even further. You know what I mean? Like really push all this stuff, and like it's making everyone scared now hearing this.
Yes, it is.
Like,
exactly.
we'll maybe have to go to a different company next time. But
yeah,
it's like the results speak for themselves. Like if you have the same process, you have the same product. And so to do something unique, you've got to have a unique process. And so we had to sort of reinvent the wheel of how to make this film. But the results speak for themselves. Like, I'm incredibly proud of the VFX work on this movie, and so like I just can't wait to get back behind the camera and push it even further next time.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it's just leaning into the uncomfortableness of that we need a little bit more comfort that we'll figure it out as we go forward. Sometimes, we were put in many different places. Now that it's done, we can be honest about it, that we're a little uncomfortable just by virtue of what we were being asked to do. But I'm really confident of the team that we have and that we can find solutions. So that's the big win for me on sort of a personal level. And then this is, just incredibly fun work. That's the other thing that I don't know if that comes through in these talks, but it's very rare to work on a movie that's original IP, that isn't a sequel, that has really visual striking language. And I think some of the reason why we're getting such great feedback is that the imagery doesn't look like anything else out there, and we're doing something wholly original. And so I'm amazingly proud of that component as well.
Andrew, Ian, did you have anything?
I think I really appreciate the fact that we traveled to those locations and captured something real in camera that we were then able to build on top of. All of the pain and the inconvenience of traveling to those areas and finding something to represent each set really makes a huge difference. And then also having James Klein and his team, the production designer, on throughout the entire movie, so that in post, towards the end, he's able to still talk to Gareth and inform the designs and ensure that that purity, that original intent that was there in pre-production is there in every final frame. That was great to observe and to be a part of. And so I think that's why this stands out as being something fresh and unique.
Yeah. I mean, you know, for me, it's the collaboration. I mean, not every project offers such a chance to be, you know, core within the filmmaking team, and that's how we see ourselves. As you know, we're filmmakers. It just so happens our tools are computers, not necessarily paintbrushes. But having that relationship with Gareth, being, you know, in the heart of the process, there are many projects out there that aren't having that, and I don't think, you know, necessarily are able to find the value of the visual effects work that goes into each shot in quite the same way. Yeah, or the fact there wasn't much sort of gratuitous here. You know, our work could be guided towards where it was going to give us most bang for a buck. It wasn't just for the sake of. We weren't answering problems downstream because, you know, no one had thought it in a lazy way. It was an enjoyable, close collaboration where we were, you know, Gareth had a target, of course, but we were part of the process to bring it to fruition at the end.
Thank you all so much, and congratulations. Thank you for a beautiful film and a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.